In this tutorial, we'll be using AIMS from the recruiter perspective to see how it automates the scheduling of job market interviews. We need to start by choosing settings appropriate to the organization. My default screen is a setup page, but if I ever need to access it again, I can always click Setup at the menu at the top. At this point, the only mandatory item is the venue at which we'll conduct interviews. We can set this by going to Interview Venues and then selecting Edit. Generally for US organizations, the venue will be the ASSA. Institutions in Canada may choose both the ASSA and the CEEE, while institutions in Europe may also interview at the Royal Economic Society meeting. If we'd like to add another working language or change it from English, we simply select Edit under Working Languages. Having selected venues, we can now choose locations at which we will interview. A location is not required at this point, but setting one now will save us some time later, so I'll do it for both the CEEE and the ASSA. I've left the room label and code blank in this case because those are specific to an individual situation. Finally, in our setup, we may want to share our final interview schedule with colleagues or inform interviewees of who their interviewers are. In both cases, we'll need to add the names and emails of our colleagues, which is done by clicking on Colleagues' Names and Email Addresses, and then Add Group of Colleagues. We can avoid repetition by copying and pasting an existing list, although it's advisable to review a formatting guide at the top before we save anything. For this example, we'll only use 2 names. We have nothing else to set up, and so we'll move directly to the Interviews section. Here we have all of the positions that we've not retired. Currently, 2 of the positions need at least 1 group, although we can always add more. Multiple groups are most helpful for broader postings. For example, you could create 1 group for junior candidates and 1 group for senior candidates. When creating a group, you may want to check the Hide Filled Interview Slots box. If selected, it will simply remove any of the interview options that have already been scheduled. If it's not selected, it will be visible but show up as unavailable. Every interviewee in a given group will choose an interview slot from the same set of possible slots. We assign these in the Interview Schedule section. Let's start by adding some candidates we want to interview. We click on Add Interviewees and then search using the candidate's last name. The first 1 or 2 letters of the last name should suffice. When we found the candidate that we're looking for, we hit Select to add them to our list of interviewees. When we're finished, we click Return to Interview Schedule. Notice that we currently have a warning message because we've added more interviewees than interview slots. This makes sense since we've not created any interview slots yet, but we will not be able to invite applicants to sign up for slots until we can assign each interviewee to a slot. We can create these slots by clicking on the Add Interview Slots button. Before going into this section, it's worth mentioning that if you've not assigned a location in the setup page, it would be a good idea to set that up now. The default setting will fill the day with 30-minute interview slots from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. We can edit these parameters to suit the needs of a particular interview, but we should not feel the need to edit them simply to add in breaks, as these are added simply in the next step. Finally, we select the location from the drop-down menu and attach it to those slots. We now have 16 slots available for interviews that we can edit. If we select Edit to the right of a particular slot, we can make adjustments for that specific time. Chances are, though, that we'll want to make a change to multiple slots. Let's do an example of putting in a break for lunch using this method. We select the slots that we want to change, and then use the drop-down menu to change the type. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, and breaks will not appear as interview slots available to candidates, and they're preferable to simply deleting the slots as they'll make the final schedule much more readable. We also see an option of assigning an interviewee to a slot. It is not recommended to use this option unless for some reason a candidate cannot select a slot for themselves online. We're almost ready to send out invitations to sign up, but it's worth mentioning that we have a message indicating we have more slots than interviewees. Because this is an example, it has an unusually low number of interviewees, and so we'll leave things as is, but in practice we may wind up with empty slots where we don't really want them, and so we might want to make the number of slots closer to the number of interviewees. To invite interviewees, we check the candidates we're interested in, usually just selecting check all, but we can also use individual candidates, and then click Proceed to Message. We may edit this message however we like, but it is best not to change anything in the braces, as these are instructions for the program to replace them with an appropriate value, such as a candidate name. Once we're happy with our message, we simply click Send. If we ever need to refer to the message that was sent to the candidates, we can use the mail log link to the right to see any past communication. As we can see, the variable was replaced with the candidate's name to personalize the message. At any time, we can specify interviewers for slots. We already added 2 colleagues at the start of this tutorial, so let's add them both to the interviewer slots. Notice that even though I selected some of the break periods, Ames did not assign an interviewer to it, and so it doesn't matter if you include these slots or not. Once we've assigned interviewers, we can notify the candidate by checking the slots that we wish to notify, and then selecting the Proceed to Message button at the bottom. Again, we can edit the message, and when we send it, it will be included in the mail log. When our schedule is complete, we can produce a nice simple version of it by selecting Printable Schedule at the bottom of the screen, and then printing it or saving it as a PDF. This completes the tutorial. For information about scheduling an interview as an applicant, feel free to visit the website for the preceding tutorials and a tour of the site.